This is a course of review. Samuel marks a transition period in the life of Israel. Israel's gone from a time of the judges, which was really a time of anarchy, and it's progressing into a time of monarchy. Now, I like to think of Israel as always having been in a time of monarchy. Because God is the king. He gave the Torah, which is his law. And Israel was given the option to follow it or not. And during the time of the anarchy, which was the time of the book of Judges, we saw chaos develop. And we saw the people they did what was right in their own eyes. And so God would provide a judge to get Israel out of trouble. And so we see here in 1 Samuel, God providing the last of the judges and among the first of the prophets, although the prophets really existed throughout much of the book of Judges as well. But here we see Samuel, who is going to be a judge and a prophet. So let's pick up basically the first three chapters dealt with the growth of and how Samuel winds up on the scene. He's the son of a barren woman who God finally allows to have a child, and she has 5 more children after she finally gives birth to Samuel. And because she had promised God to give this child to Shmuel, Shmuel basically winds up serving in the Mishkan, the tabernacle of God, under the auspices of Eli, the priest, the Kohen. So let's pick up, Shmuel had, bear with me 1 second. Oh, hello, who is this? Hi, Logan. I'm in the middle of something. Is there? Okay. Can you call me back? Okay. Bye. I thought maybe he was trying to get on. Okay.
That'd be great.
So Shmuel basically is revealed to be a prophet. He's still a young man, a very young man, when when God speaks to him and reveals basically the fate of the priest Eli. Eli's sons had defiled their positions as Kohanim, as priests, and corrupted the priesthood. As we recall, they were basically eating the fat of the sacrifice. And God had forbidden the consumption of fat. And they were messing around with the women that came to the tabernacle. And so people had developed a contempt for what God had ordained what God had ordained had turned into corrupt religiosity. And so Shmuel develops a reputation. The land had not heard prophets for a long time. And now people knew that there was a prophet in the land. His name was Shmuel. And so we begin with chapter 4. And we recall that Shmuel had promised Eli that this was his fate. He would die, and his sons would die on the same day. Furthermore, his genealogy would cease to be the Kohen Gadol, the head priest. And beyond that, none of his offspring, his male offspring, would live to old age. And so we see here that Eli is going to be the last of that line to live to old age. Any questions so far?
Mm-hmm.
Huh?
Yes.
Go ahead.
No, I understand.
Oh, okay. So let's begin by reading. Now Israel went out to battle against the Philistines and camped again beside Ebenezer. I like the way that this is often pronounced. It's often usually pronounced Ebenezer. But when it's pronounced Ebenezer, you don't know what it means. Even is a stone, and Etzer is to help. So this was called the stone of help. And this is the first mention of that particular location in the Bible. So we don't know until now, or we don't know presently why it was named that. We'll discover that in 7:12, in chapter 7, verse 12. And that was basically a pile of stones that Shmuel had raised up as a marker to recall the defeat of the Philistines at the hands of Israel under the leadership of Shmuel. Okay, now Israel went to battle against the Philistines and camped beside Ebenezer, and the Philistines encamped in Aphek. There was a valley between the two, and they were within view of each other. Then the Philistines put themselves in battle array against Israel, and when they joined battle, Israel was defeated by the Philistines, who killed about 4,000 men of the army in the field. And when the people had come into the camp, the elders of Israel said, "Why has the Lord defeated us today before the Philistines? Let us bring the ark of the covenant of the Lord from Shiloh to us." We recall that the Mishkan, the tabernacle, was located in Shiloh, which was very close to the Jordan. And so now, where was the ark supposed to be?
Supposed to be back in the in the temporary temple.
Right, it was supposed to be in the Holy of Holies,
Right.
within the Mishkan, within the tabernacle. And now they're taking it out.
Wow.
And so they think that by bringing the ark out into the battlefield that they're going to win. What enables Israel to win?
God,
God.
God does. But what condition does Israel have to have in order to win?
obedience,
What's that?
obedience.
Right.
Right. They have to be obedient. They have to be righteous. And so their victory is totally dependent upon the righteousness of Israel. And we recall earlier that when Israel is in complete obedience, nobody in their army dies. So Israel was not obedient, and they lose to the Philistines. How would you liken their introduction of the ark of God into the battle?
Well, they're going to celebrate. The Israelis will celebrate, but that's
Right.
not going to help them.
But I'm gonna ask you a question. Uh, Marta, has Joshua put a mezuzah on the front of the door yet? I can't hear you.
Not yet. I think so. I don't know. But I don't think so. I think
Okay.
not yet.
Do you think that God is going to bless you if you put a mezuzah on your door?
I think that God bless me when I'm obedient, not I don't know if mezuzah is needed for that.
I think of what we have here is a superstition. The command of Numbers, I think it's chapter 15, or well, number 6, and you shall place it on the doorposts of your house and upon your gates and so on. I don't think it was necessarily to be literal. I think it was intended to be figurative. You shall talk about it. The Lord shall be present in what you do. Now, there are no descriptions as to what a mezuzah is supposed to say. There are no descriptions as to what it's supposed to look like. There are no descriptions as to what a phylactery is supposed to say. You're supposed to bind it on your arms and between your foreheads. There's nothing there that indicates that it's supposed to be literal. I've come to the conclusion that I wear tzitzit, the fringes, because it's literal. Why? Because it says that one of them shall be blue. So you were to wear fringes, plus Yeshua wore fringes. He wore fringes when the woman who was hemorrhaging came and touched the fringes on his coat, on his cloak. But I think here, first of all, where did God command that you're supposed to bring the ark into battle?
He didn't.
So they were relying on superstition. And this had become a battle now between God, Hashem, and the God of the Philistines, Dagon. And what's going to happen is God is going to become embarrassed because now Israel has placed God's reputation on the line. So the people sent to Shiloh, and that they might bring from the ark the covenant of the Lord of hosts, who dwells between the cherubim. And the two sons of Eli, Hophni and Phinehas, were there with the ark of the covenant of God. I'm sorry, often it's pronounced Phinehas. It's really Pinchas. That's his name. Verse 5. And when the ark of the covenant of the Lord came into the camp, all Israel shouted so loudly that the earth shook. Wow, we're going to win now because we got the ark of God with us. And it did serve one purpose, to cause the Philistines to fear. The Philistines heard the noise, the shout. They said, "What does the sound of the great shout in the camp of the Hebrews mean?" Then they understood that the ark of the Lord had come into the camp. So the Philistines were afraid, for they said, "God has come into the camp." And they said, "Woe to us, for such a thing has never happened before. Woe to us! Who will deliver us from the hand of these mighty gods?" So they don't even realize that there's only one God. And yet this God did have a reputation. These are the gods who struck the Egyptians with all the plagues in the wilderness. That was about 200-300 years before. And that incident had caused everybody in the known world to be aware of this historical event. So they said, "Be strong and conduct yourselves like men, you Philistines, that you do not become servants of the Hebrews, as they have been to you. Conduct yourselves like men and fight." So the Philistines fought, and Israel was defeated, and every man fled to his tent. There was a very great slaughter, and there fell of Israel 30,000 foot soldiers. That's a lot of men.
Yep. Yep.
Also, the ark of God was captured, and the two sons of Eli, Hophni and Pinchas, died. Then a man of Benjamin ran from the battle line the same day and came to Shiloh with his clothes torn and dirt on his head. Now when he came, there was Eli sitting on a seat by the wayside watching, for his heart trembled for the ark of God. And keeping the ark of God was more important than anything else. And you know what? There was really nothing to worry about, because the ark of God's going to come back home. Because God is in charge. And the men came into the city and told it, and all the city cried out. When Eli heard the noise of the outcry, he said, "What does the sound of this tumult mean?" And the man came quickly and told Eli. And Eli was 98 years old. He was the last person in his household to live to an old age. And his eyes were so dim that he could not see. And the man said to Eli, "I am he who came from the battle, and I fled today from the battle line." And he said, "What happened, my son?" So the messenger answered, said, "Israel has fled before the Philistines, and there has been a great slaughter among the people. Also your two sons, Hophni and Pinchas, are dead, and the ark of God has been captured." Here we see the fulfillment of the prophecy that the young man Samuel, Shmuel, had given to Eli. Verse 18. Then it happened when he made mention of the ark of God that Eli fell off the seat backward by the side of the gate, and his neck was broken, and he died. For the man was old and heavy, and he had judged Israel 40 years. Now his daughter-in-law, Pinchas's wife, was with child, due to be delivered. And when she heard the news that the ark of God was captured, and that her father-in-law and her husband were dead, she bowed herself and gave birth, for her labor pains came upon her. Would bad news like that impact a woman who was pregnant? Could she go into an early labor?
Maybe the stress could do that.
Huh?
I said the stress could do that.
Yeah. Well, apparently this was such a shock to her that she did. And about the time of her death, the women who stood by her said to her, "Do not fear, for you have borne a son." But she did not answer, nor did she regard it. Then she named the child Kavod. I love that. Again, here's another example of these poor English translations. Ichabod, and they named their children Ichabod. The Hebrew is kavod, which means there is no glory. The glory has departed from Israel because the ark of God had been captured, and because of her father-in-law and her husband. And she said, the glory has departed from Israel, for the ark of God had been captured.
I have a question.
Go ahead.
Is she aware that her spouse was doing these things? Because obviously Eli knew it. Okay.
Well, oh, was she aware that her spouse was up to all this no good Nick stuff?
Yeah.
I don't know.
Just curious, but the father did.
The father did, and he was very lax in his reprimanding of his sons.
Okay.
Well, you would think that if they were doing that, the two sons, if they were doing that for a very long time, it would have been known. And it said that people didn't like it, didn't like the two of them because they were not what they were supposed to be.
And sometimes
Go ahead.
sometimes we can see in the Bible that if there is something that they talking about eyes that they were dimmed or he didn't see well. For me, it has two meanings because he can physically sign can be a damage, but also he didn't see what the sons were doing, or he didn't want to see what they were doing because he never said that you're doing something wrong, and he should do that.
Yeah.
Do you know that they were cheating on the sacrifices?
Yeah.
He knew that, and time had passed already, so he was aware.
But sometimes you don't want to see some things,
Yeah,
and it's like you have like something on your eyes that you pretending I don't see that,
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. Just turn the other cheek. Just look the other way.
Yeah.
So she dies. They have a son named Ichabod. I don't think there's any mention of him ever functioning as a priest. And we know that because of Shmuel, he's not going to live very long because of which Shmuel foretold. But I find this next adventure interesting. We'll read through it, but in advance, you know, you've heard this story many times that the ark is taken by the Philistines. But what strikes me is, what was Israel trying to do? They were trying to defeat the Philistines in battle. So they bring the Ark of the Covenant down and they lose the battle. And I love this passage because it's almost comical. God wins the battle all by himself. He doesn't need an army. And we're going to see that. Chapter 5. Then the Philistines took the ark of God and brought it from Ebenezer to Ashdod. Ashdod, as you know, is a Philistine city. There were 5 Philistine cities. And you're probably familiar with one of them. It's called Gaza. And over 3,000 years or so, nothing has changed. Including in the Gaza territory, there's a town called Ashdod. When the Philistines took the ark of God, they brought it into the house of Dagon and set it by Dagon. Dagon was their god. Tell you a little bit about him. Here's an image of him. And the word, I've heard it said that the root means crops or corn, but I've always known Daled Gimel, to be a fish. And so there's some discrepancy about this God, although here's an image apparently of what he may have looked like. A merman,
Okay.
head of a man with the fish, with the tail of a fish. An interesting thing about him is you've heard of the god Baal.
Mm-hmm.
He was the big shot god back then. He was the god of the weather, the god of thunder, and so on. He was very powerful. Well, apparently Dagon was his father in Mesopotamian mythology. And so this is a big shot god. And hey, because the Philistines won, Dagon must be more powerful and stronger than the God of Israel. So, verse 2, when the Philistines took the ark of God, somebody say something? When the Philistines took the ark of God, they brought it to the house of Dagon and set it by Dagon. When the people of Ashdod arose early in the morning, there was Dagon fallen on his face to the earth before the ark of the Lord. That's weird.
I think that's hilarious.
It is. It really is.
Well, you would think they would think about that, because here's their God bound to the other.
Absolutely.
What's that, Doug?
The Philistines should have thought about this, because their God fell down and worshiped the Israeli God.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. worshiping, just an idol.
Yeah.
And he's worshiping the ark of the God of Israel. So they arose early in the morning. There was Dagon, fallen on his face to the earth before the ark of the Lord. So they took Dagon and set it in its place again. And when they rose early the next morning, there was Dagon fallen on its face to the ground before the ark of the Lord. Interesting here, the way that the New King James Version translates it. This is why I'm critical of all translations. The head of Dagon and both the palms and his hands were broken off on the threshold. The word there is kuratot. It's derived from the word karat, which means to cut. His hands and his head had been cut off. He had been decapitated as if by a sickle. If it had fallen, you would have seen jagged edges if it had been broken off. But here it had literally been cut off. Only Dagon's torso was left of it. And the idea here, I think anyway, is that he was on the ground like a fish.
That's funny.
Therefore, neither the priests of Dagon nor any who come into Dagon's house tread on the threshold of Dagon and Ashdod to this day.
Question.
Go ahead, Dean.
Is this why some of the Muslims don't do this?
What's that?
And this what some of the Muslims do?
That I don't know.
Because I saw somebody in Africa or Ethiopia, they don't go, they go around the back door.
Yeah, this is probably an inner court to
Mhm.
the temple. They place the ark in the presence of it.
Mhm.
So entering, they would defile their god, Dagon, by stepping on the threshold where the head and the hands were. So they would jump over it to prevent defiling it. Now it's interesting. Zephaniah, which, as I understand, was written after the destruction of the second temple, of the first temple, rather, which would have been, I don't know, 700 years later. Apparently, this practice was still going on. And so we see in Zephaniah 9:9, in the same day I will punish all those who leap over the threshold, who fill their masters' houses with violence and deceit. This was an idolatrous practice to not defile the idol, to not defile an idol, which might as well be defiled, because it is by its very presence a defilement. And so I do have in my notes here, Zephaniah had prophesied from 640 to 69 BCE. And so what is going on here had preceded the prophet Zephaniah by 1400. Let's see, the event of by 800 years. Verse 6. But the hand was heavy on the people of Ashdod, and he ravaged them and struck them with Aflim. Now, we don't really know what they are. The Greek translates it as hemorrhoids. And so in some of the English translations, he plagued them with hemorrhoids. Well, to be honest with you, I don't think that the Philistines were going around scratching their butts.
That's I've got the King James. It says tumors.
Mm-hmm.
I'm not exactly sure if it was tumors either. I think, I mean, I could be wrong, but when we look at chapter 5, verse 11, that's coming up because we're in chapter 5, we're going to see why I think that this plague was bubonic plague. And I'll show you why. People were dying from this, for one thing. Another thing, it was the result of a rat infestation. So let's read on. When the men of Ashdod saw how it was, they said, "The ark of the God of Israel must not remain with us, for his hand is harsh towards us and Dagon, our God." Therefore they sent and gathered to themselves all the lords of the Philistines and said, "What shall we do with the ark of the God of Israel?" And they answered, "Let the ark of the God of Israel be carried away to Gath." We don't want to deal with it. Let's send it over to my brother. Who are they thinking of? Who are they caring about? So they carried the ark of the God of Israel away. So it was after they had carried it away that the hand of the Lord was against the city with a very great destruction. And he struck the men of the city, both small and great. And these tumors, or whatever they were, broke out on them. Therefore, they sent the ark of God to Ekron. So it was as the ark of God came to Ekron, the Ekronites cried out, saying, "They have brought the ark of the God of Israel to us to kill us and our people." So they sent and gathered together all the lords of the Philistines and said, "Send away the ark of the God of Israel and let it go back to its own place." See, Eli didn't have to worry about the ark of God leaving. It was coming back because that's the way God is. We talk about God leaving Israel. No, he never has and he never will. Let's go on. Send it back to Israel, to its own place, so that it does not kill us and our people, for there was a deadly destruction throughout all the city. This weren't just tumors. This weren't hemorrhoids. This was a plague. And the hand of God was heavy there. And the men who did not die were stricken with the tumors. And the cry of the city went up to heaven. Anybody else recognize the time when the cry went up to heaven?
They when they were in Egypt, they did.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. How about Sodom and Gomorrah?
Oh, I don't think they did anything.
But this is an expression as to how drastic the plague had fallen upon Ekron. and the other Canaanite Philistine cities. Verse 6. Bear with me 1 second. There we go. Now the ark of the Lord was in the country of the Philistines 7 months. And the Philistines called for the Kohanim, the priests, and diviners, saying, "What shall we do with the ark of the Lord?" It's interesting, they're calling it the ark of Hashem. They have come, I think, to realize that he ain't just a God, and that there's only one God, and that's him. God is trying to reveal himself to them. Tell us how we should send it to its place. Verse 3, so they said, if you send away the ark of the God of Israel, do not send it empty, but by all means return it to him with a trespass offering. Well, what's a trespass offering? What's a trespass?
A sin.
What's that?
Sin offering.
Sin.
Specific offering that Israel was required, that it was basically the same as the sin offering, and it involved the cutting away of the flesh of the animal and burning that in an area away outside the camp, burning the fat on the altar, and literally allowing the shoulder and the breast of the sacrifice to the priest, to the Kohen. But the Philistines didn't know anything about that. But what's a trespass? When you've done something that you shouldn't have done. It's like you walk on the grass in spite of the fact that there's a sign that says don't walk on the grass. Now the ark of the Lord was in the country of the Philistines. Okay, let's move on. So they're going, they're saying, then you will be healed, and it will be known to you why his hand is not removed from you. Well, that's an interesting prediction. Did they really know it? It could be because these were diviners. They were magic men. They were practitioners of divination. Verse 4, then they said, what is the trespass offering which we shall return to him? They answered, 5 golden tumors and 5 golden rats. So we see here the cause of the plague. That's why I think it's a bubonic plague. The tumors were bulges. If it's a bubonic plague, it would have been an infection of the lymphatic system. And it was apparently carried about by rats because there were a lot of rats simultaneously showing up with the plague. According to the number of the lords of the Philistines. So how many lords were there? There were 5 cities. For the same plague was on all of you and on your lords. Therefore you shall make images of your tumors and images of your rats that ravaged the land. And you shall give glory to the God of Israel. Wow. God is being glorified. His intent is to be glorified. He wants the whole world to know that he is the only God of the universe.
They are starting to recognize that.
Right. And so they're still not. Go ahead, Dean.
Oh, I didn't say anything.
Well, okay. Perhaps he will lighten his hand from you, from your gods, and from your land. Why then do you harden your hearts as the Egyptians and Pharaoh hardened their hearts? Wow. 300 years had passed, at least, and people remembered what happened to Egypt, the plagues that befell Egypt, and the destruction of the Egyptian army in the Red Sea. And here are these diviners recalling history, not even their own history, and recognizing that their hearts were hardened. The hearts of the Philistines were hardened and required repentance. Any comments? Any observations?
Well, they're starting to recognize that the Egyptian God is the only one. Theirs is not powerful enough to defeat him.
And so they recognized when he did mighty things for them, they did not let the people go, that they might depart. Now, therefore, make a new cart. This is their advice. Take 2 milk cows that have never been yoked and hitch the cows to the cart and take their calves home away from them. Then take the ark of the Lord and set it on the cart, and put the articles of gold which are returning to him as a trespass offering in a chest by its side. Then send it away and let it go. And watch if it goes up the road to its own territory, to Beit Shemesh. Then he has done us this great evil. So in other words, they're looking for a sign.
Well, they were. One was pretty good. The milk cows, if they just had calves, they did not want to be separated from their calves. And here they are hitched to that wagon, and so they head straight out. Well, that's a sign right there that God's hand is in it.
Right. If I were a milk cow, I would go straight to my calf.
All right.
Let's see. But if not, we shall know that it is not his hand that struck us. It happened to us by chance. So they're putting God to the test. Then the men did so. They took 2 milk cows, hitched them to the cart, shut up their calves at home, and set the ark of the Lord on the cart, and the chest of the gold rats and the images of their tumors. And the cows headed straight for the road to Beth Shemesh, and went along the highway, lowing as they went. What does that mean, Doug?
Yeah, well, that's a good sign that the good Lord is leading them.
Well, what does a cow do when it's lowing?
Oh, they're missing their calves.
Yeah, I think they're going, meh. It's a sign that they're not happy.
Yeah, but they're going anyway.
Yeah, they're doing what they don't want to do. Go ahead, Martha.
I have a question. How it's possible that they were touching the ark and they didn't die?
Yeah.
Because
That's
you know, always only priests could do that, or the special kind of man. And now Philistines, they took the ark and they had to move somehow that ark and touching it. So how they didn't die? Why?
That's a good question. That is a very good question. I think that how did the ark uh, find its way into battle?
I I didn't understand. One more
How
time.
how did Israel bring the ark into battle?
well, a priest.
Yeah.
He said the priest brought it in there. Well, they had they were bringing it in by foot.
Right. And what do you do when you're carrying the ark by foot?
Well, it's
Poles, those poles.
They had the poles,
yeah,
poles that were covered in gold. And so it could very likely be that the poles were still in the ark.
Yeah.
yeah. That'd probably be the only answer.
But still, does the pagan still be the one to load it on the cart? Somebody
And
had laid on the cart.
those guys would not know that God had said, "Don't touch the ark."
That's true. They would not know. That's a
They were
good
very lucky.
question, Marta.
Yeah, it is.
I'm wondering if any of the Jewish sages have an explanation for that.
Mhm.
Let's move on, but that's a great question. Let's move on. Verse 13. Now the people of Beit Shemesh were reaping their wheat harvest in the valley, and they lifted their eyes and saw the ark. Well, what's going on here? I find this interesting. Is there reaping the wheat harvest? What time of year is it?
It's spring.
No, it's the fall festival.
It's it would have been 50 days after the Passover, which would have made it early summer. And in all likelihood, this is around the time when Shavuos, the Feast of Weeks, would have been taking place.
Hmm.
Now, you think anybody in Israel was observing Shavuos? I don't think so. And what is Shavuos supposed to be? What happened? What happened when the church celebrated Shavuos?
We celebrating the Holy Spirit was given and the Torah in the same time, like
Right. And on that day, 3,000 people were added to the ecclesia. Here, we're going to see a whole bunch of people being eliminated from the ecclesia. They lifted up their eyes and saw the ark and rejoiced to see it. Then the cart, it's really strange. I call this premature celebration. I can't help but think of the people of modern day Gath and Ekron and Gaza celebrating that they had torn down a wall between them and Israel and killed 1,200 people, and they were celebrating. And in the words of G.K. Chesterton, before you tear down a fence, examine why it was put there in the first place. And here they were celebrating and passing out candy. And now their homes have been destroyed. And many of their loved ones have been killed. I call this early celebration. And here we see the people of Beit Shemesh doing the same thing. They're celebrating. Then the ark came into the field of Joshua. Yehoshua said Bet Shemesh and stood there, and a large stone was there. So they split the wood of the cart and offered the cows as a burnt offering to the Lord. The Leviim took down the ark of the Lord and the chest that was in it, in which were the articles of gold. I don't think that the Leviim would have taken Martha. I don't think that they would have taken down the ark if they had not known that there, if there had not been poles. That's my answer.
Okay.
And put them on a large stone. The men of Beth Shemesh offered burnt offerings and made sacrifices the same day to the Lord. So when the 5 lords of the Philistines had seen it, they returned to Ekron the same day. These are the golden tumors which the Philistines returned as trespass offerings, and the golden rats. And it basically says here that according to the cities of the Philistines. Verse 19. Then what happened? He struck, that is the Lord, the men of Beth Shemesh. Why? Because they had looked into the ark of the Lord. He struck 50,070 men, the people. And the people lamented because the Lord had struck the people with a great slaughter.
That was one of the laws, wasn't it? They wasn't supposed to look in there, not even the high priest.
That's right. And so a whole lot of killing going on. The Philistines died. The men of Beth Shemesh died. Why?
The people did not do what God had told them to do.
I think it was because they had a flippant attitude towards God.
Uh-huh.
God is holy. And the Philistines and the men of Beth Shemesh were both guilty of the same crime. The Philistines sought to belittle God through their idolatry. The men of Beth Shemesh weren't exactly practicing idolatry, but they lacked respect for the holy things of God. And so I leave it with what does religion do? We go to church, or we do things that are religious without a serious regard for the holiness of God and what He expects from us. Any questions, any observations, any comments, any thoughts?
on that's verse 21, that they send to the other city, just take the ark. It's the same what the Philistines did after they
Yeah, they're handing it over. It's a good
Yeah.
observation, Marta.
And these are giants, right? The Philistines are
No.
giant people.
Not all of them, but they did have giants in their midst. Well, I think we're going to end on this point. Thank you for joining.
Thank you.
Anything that specifically we can pray about? Let's see.
Well, our country.
Yeah.